A few days ago, an organization that specializes in providing loans to international students reached out to me. I wasn't very interested because I've always relied on borrowing money from others for my studies abroad. They mentioned that their main focus is helping families who are unable to continue paying. I asked them for some data, and they said they receive about 5,000 inquiries a year, just for the US, from people asking what to do when they can no longer make payments.
The artificial bull market triggered by the Chinese Communist Party at the end of September suddenly skyrocketed. A large group of new investors, swayed by Chinese media, couldn't resist the temptation and jumped into the stock market. But after just a few days of gains, the market plummeted, leaving devastating consequences. Soon, stories began to emerge of students abroad unable to pay their tuition because their families lost everything. Recently, a netizen named Lucy shared her experience on social media. She comes from an ordinary working-class family. Her parents earn about 150,000 yuan a year, and she makes around 30 to 40,000 yuan from freelancing and part-time work. After painstakingly saving up 600,000 yuan for her study abroad expenses, she was hit with devastating news. Your dad lost almost 600,000 yuan in the stock market. For now, try to cut back on your spending. As for the remaining tuition and rent, I'll see if we can borrow from some relatives. Lucy had just started her first year at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and it has only been about a month since classes began. With the stock market heating up, her family, who was convinced by a friend that it's a sure bet, decided to gamble. They went all in, only for the market to crash. Not only were they unable to recover their losses, but her tuition, rent, and living expenses, which amount to at least another 260,000 yuan, were now gone. She also has a younger sister in high school, so there's no hope of relying on them. If Lucy doesn't start working soon, her study abroad dream will soon come to an end. Recently, platforms like Xiaohongshu have seen a flood of desperate SOS posts. Families have gambled all of their children's tuition on the stock market. The aftermath has been increasingly heartbreaking. Some parents, confident in their decisions, left their children in a panic. My dad said life is about seizing opportunities, so he went all in. Now he expects me to be financially free during my studies. Some students, too, gambled their entire tuition on stocks. In one case, a student lost 200,000 yuan just like that, feeling as if their world had collapsed. These types of posts have been popping up more frequently on social media. Even through the screen, the anxiety is palpable. The comment sections are just as cutting. Investing in stocks usually ends in losses, and studying abroad is also a gamble. 15 years ago, my dad did the same thing, and I never got to finish school. One netizen asked, if you had to choose between a bull market or studying abroad, what would you pick? If you are wealthy, you can have it all. 200,000 for school, 200,000 for the market, but for most, it's one or the other. No matter how good the stock market looks, please don't use your child's life-saving study money abroad to gamble. Please, parents, listen to me. The consultant shared that recently several parents reached out to her for advice. One has a child at UCL, just starting their first year, and another at Imperial College London. Both parents asked if they could make installment payments for their children's tuition and rent. It wasn't that they hadn't prepared enough money. Everything was set aside, but the market was just too tempting. They wanted to invest part of the tuition in stocks, hoping to make a quick profit to cover the rest of the tuition, or even a house in London. The consultant was speechless. In her years of working in study abroad services, she had encountered many parents who gambled their children's study money in the stock market, only to lose it all. The student's education would be cut short, and the family would be left with nothing. Some students were exceptionally hardworking and talented, but when their tuition was cut off, they had no choice but to return home. Their study abroad plans were completely ruined. Some ended up at joint Chinese foreign universities, while others even had to retake the college entrance exams. These experiences leave lifelong scars, yet they happen year after year. On the surface, investing in the stock market seems like a gamble, but studying abroad is also a high-stakes bet. In this high-risk environment, if an average family chooses to follow the crowd into the stock market, their child might face a cutoff in funding and be unable to continue studying. But if they invest in their child's education, the child may return home with a degree only to earn a salary of a few thousand yuan per month, with no hope of ever making back the investment. This is the reality in China. While neither the stock market nor studying abroad guarantees return, the broad perspectives and knowledge gained during a study abroad experience become an invisible asset for students. Beyond receiving a prestigious education and advancing professionally, students also build networks that serve as potential social capital. That said, studying abroad requires a financial foundation at home. If a family has to scrape together every penny for their child to study abroad, it may not be worth it. Especially with the domestic economy on the decline in recent years and education costs continuing to rise, the issue of families unable to support overseas students has remained a constant topic. In the past 2 years, many middle-class families have faced layoffs, bankruptcy, or investment failures, resulting in an overnight loss of wealth. Housing loans, car loans, daily expenses, and education costs have become mountains that weigh down middle-class parents. Many families are now unable to fund their children's education. The energetic and ambitious intensive parenting style, known as chicken parenting, has been forced to give way to the harsh economic reality. Parents are now making compromises. While they won't skimp on their child's education, they're opting for more economical routes. A child who was once enrolled in a 200,000 yuan per year international school might now have to transfer to a public school. Extracurricular activities like piano, chess, skiing, ice skating, and horseback riding have been reduced to just 1 or 2 more affordable options. Expensive private tutoring sessions are now being replaced by free online courses for self-study, and plans for overseas studies are now being swapped for intense competition of the college entrance exams. The worst cases involve students already studying abroad, suddenly cut off financially, leaving them stranded in a foreign country without any support. Meanwhile, tuition fees continue to rise. According to the latest 2023-2024 Higher Education Cost Report from College Board, the average tuition for out-of-state students at public four-year universities has increased to $29,150, up by $850 from the previous academic year, a 3% increase. Including room and board, the total average cost is now $41,920. Private universities saw even steeper increases, with average tuition reaching $41,540, a 4% rise, bringing total costs to $56,190. Many of these so-called middle-class families supporting overseas students are not as wealthy as they seem. Where do the poorest international students come from? Surprisingly, it's actually from first-tier cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen. These students are often the children of corporate executives, small business owners, or government employees. While living abroad, they are generally very frugal and work hard academically, with clear goals and plans for their future. They hope to either stay and work locally after graduation or return to China and join a large company. In contrast, the truly wealthy students usually come from small towns or even smaller cities. Aside from the first few days of the school year, when they might add you on social media, you hardly ever see them in class. Their social media is filled with luxury cars and glamorous women. If you ask what their family does, they avoid the question, or sometimes they can't even explain. But in reality, they didn't go abroad to study seriously, they just want a diploma. Students from cities like Beijing or Shanghai usually rely on their parents' salaries and savings to fund their education abroad. It's part of a plan their middle-class families have made to ensure a brighter future for their children outside of China. On the other hand, students from small towns could never afford to study abroad based on their parents' normal income. Those students come from families that are either wealthy or have government connections, and their goal is often to return home and take over the family business after getting their degree. At the same time, while the cost of studying abroad continues to rise, the economic uncertainty faced by middle-class families has made things even more difficult for them. These families not only face the pressure of being unable to continue supporting their children abroad, but very few graduates will ever earn enough to make back what was invested in them. Some students choose to cut back on spending, work part-time jobs, and study hard, while others are forced to drop out and return home with regret. Many students who once imagined living a utopian life overseas now find themselves in a situation where everything has fallen apart. Many families pin all their hopes and resources on their child's education, expecting a significant return. However, the reality is often harsh, as education, when viewed purely as an investment, carries substantial risks, and the returns are unpredictable. So, what should international students do if they face a financial cutoff? It's undoubtedly a heavy blow for those who are already accustomed to life abroad. Faced with sudden financial pressure, they must reconsider their future. Returning home is not the only option. In the face of a financial cutoff, students need to assess their situation and come up with a practical plan. They can seek help from their school or organizations to find out if there are scholarships or financial aid available. They can opt for more affordable living arrangements, such as renting a cheaper apartment or sharing with friends, and save on clothing expenses by buying from thrift stores. They might also consider part-time jobs or internships to ease the financial burden while gaining practical experience. If continuing their studies abroad becomes impossible, returning home and leveraging local resources and opportunities can also be a good option to secure a solid foundation for their future. Meanwhile, as more international students are being cut off, back in China, many young people born in the 2000s are responding to CCP propaganda and rushing into the stock market. They've taken out bank loans and increased leverage to join what's promoted as the bull market, only to find themselves part of what could be the CCP's biggest Ponzi scheme yet. Credit score? I don't need it. You can have it. Some say that the generation that conquered all industries, the post-2000s, has finally met their match in the stock market. The post-70s generation, being seasoned and shrewd, has already made their exit. The post-80s generation is disillusioned, trapped in their losses. The post-90s generation is too busy working to even find time. But the post-2000s, they have no mortgage, no car loans, no kids to worry about, so they've charged straight into the market with heavy leverage. It's truly a case, if no one helps me to rise to success, I'll take out loans and fight my own battle. I'm ready to make a name for myself and stand out from the crowd. After a long holiday, they made bold moves in the market, but when things took a wrong turn, they quickly changed tactics, showing everyone what going down together really means. Repay the loans? That's impossible. Repay what? I've never heard of it in this life, and I won't in the next either. The bank belongs to the motherland, and so do I. Since childhood, my teachers told me I'm a successor of communism. The motherland is my mother, so I'm spending her money. My mom never asked me to repay her, so why should I repay a loan? Credit score? I don't need it anymore. You can take it. With this mindset, every financial institution was terrified and immediately issued warnings to ban credit funds from entering the market, but it was too late. You have to admit, the post-2000 generation is wild. They've done what the post-80s and post-90s were too afraid to do. I declare, the boldest generation has officially been born, Generation 2000. The CCP originally aimed to create an artificial bull market through bank liquidity to stabilize the economy in the face of downturns. Their true goal was to attract citizens' bank savings, with rumors suggesting that China's total household savings amount to 340 trillion yuan. This was the CCP's real target. However, the post-2000s generation, with little in savings, completely disrupted the CCP's plan by using loans to gamble in the stock market. The financial crisis that the CCP intended to pass on to the public backfired right at the CCP's banks. Of course, aside from those using loans, many were lured in with their actual savings, and most of them ended up with heavy losses. This is because the bull market wasn't a reflection of the real economy, it was a scam. In such a treacherous scheme, the chances of ordinary people to profit were incredibly slim. Reports indicate that this so-called bull market emerged because of China's worsening economy. Bad news kept piling up, so much that it became unbearable for President Xi Jinping. As a result, poorly thought-out rescue policies were introduced. According to the Wall Street Journal on October 15th, for 2 years, Xi Jinping resisted taking strong measures to support the economy. But in late September, he made concessions. Officials and advisors close to the CCP decision-making revealed that local government finances were on the brink of collapse. For Xi, the short-term goal wasn't to massively stimulate demand, but to prevent a growing financial crisis. Analysts disclosed that reports about liquidity crises worsening across China's regions were flooding into Beijing's power center. Financially strained local governments were struggling to pay wages to civil servants, state-owned and private contractors, a problem that was becoming increasingly severe. By mid-September, the economic situation had clearly worsened. Signs of stagnation were spreading, and the real estate crisis was deepening. One person familiar with the matter said, "Local governments are facing serious cash flow problems, and measures must be taken to prevent a full-blown crisis." Reports suggested that by late September, the bad news had become so overwhelming that President Xi Jinping decided to act. Starting from September 24th, the CCP announced a series of measures, including interest rate cuts, lowering down payments for home purchases, and injecting approximately 1 trillion yuan of long-term liquidity into the financial markets, with 800 billion yuan directed to support the stock market. On October 8th, the National Development and Reform Commission held a press conference, but failed to announce the trillion-yuan economic stimulus package that the market had been expecting. Instead, they reiterated existing policies, leaving many disappointed. The Wall Street Journal reported that Xi Jinping's centralized decision-making style has repeatedly caused sudden policy reversals, increasing the opacity and unpredictability of the CCP's economic policies. This, in turn, may heighten investment risks in China. The report highlighted that mixed signals about upcoming stimulus measures sent investors on a roller coaster ride. Initially, the market was buoyed by the central bank's interest rate cuts and other easing measures, but the lack of details in subsequent economic policy announcements deflated market sentiment. On October 12th, the Ministry of Finance held a press conference and mentioned plans to issue special government bonds, though the exact amount remained unclear. Sources told the Wall Street Journal that the funds are not intended for the large-scale fiscal stimulus many had hoped for, but rather to ease local governments' liquidity pressures and inject capital into state-owned banks. Currently, many of these new policies are not direct economic stimulus measures, but rather efforts to stabilize local government finances, and by extension, the financial system and overall economy. According to insiders, this is not a stimulus package, but a risk mitigation measure. In fact, the CCP's abrupt policy shifts have led to extreme market volatility, with stocks surging and then plummeting, trapping millions of new investors right after they entered the market. According to Chinese media, from September 24th to October 8th, 256 publicly listed companies in China announced plans to reduce their holdings, with 136 companies disclosing specific plans. As the market continued to rise, the number of companies planning to reduce holdings also increased significantly. Many Chinese investors told NTD News that many local governments are deeply in debt, struggling to pay civil servant wages, and many banks and real estate companies are on the brink of collapse. While the government claims it's a market rescue, it's actually a bailout for itself. Mr. Zhou, an investor from Hunan, said, "Local government debt is severe. Some hospitals and teachers haven't been paid. The government is funneling people's money into the stock market. The listed companies take this money, pay their taxes, and local governments take their share to resolve debts. Meanwhile, regular people are stuck with the losses. I don't trust these policies anymore." A financial advisor in China revealed that the stock market is extremely risky, with many companies losing money and many being delisted. He said IPO listings have become an industry chain. Companies are bought, packaged, listed, and then reduce holdings. One listing can make tens of billions of yuan, sometimes over 100 billion, all at the expense of small investors' hard-earned money. Mr. Y, who was familiar with the CCP's financial system, commented, "China's stock market is worse than a casino. At least casinos have rules, and gamblers have close to a 50% chance of winning. In China's stock market, whoever touches it loses, especially those who think they know technical analysis and trade short-term. The ones making money are the CCP's top officials, financial approval departments, listed companies, brokers, and the market manipulators. Who are they profiting from? Small investors." Mr. Y further explained, "It's worse than a casino because casinos don't always cheat. They only do so during key moments. But in China, most publicly listed companies are essentially scams. Companies with good performance don't necessarily see their stock prices rise, and even if they do, it's sudden, and by the time you try to buy, the risks are high, or the stock is already hitting its limit, making it impossible. Meanwhile, the stocks that surge often belong to companies that aren't performing well or are near bankruptcy, with almost all financial data being falsified. This is all done with the goal of trapping investors." Now, it's not just manual market manipulation. AI is being used to automate trades. AI can analyze the behavior and mental states of small investors without insider information and always getting ahead of them, causing 95% of their trades to be wrong, eventually wiping out their capital. Mr. Y concluded, "Although Gen Z is determined to either lie flat or go down fighting, it's best not to take such risks. After all, being targeted by the CCP's banks will make life difficult. Staying away from Chinese stocks is the safest choice."